All right, what's going on, awesome people? Welcome to another episode of Countdown. This is Countdown episode number 23. I got a funny story to tell you all. We normally start our show at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but as we were preparing for tonight, because the Miami Heat are in the NBA Finals and many of our Uniters are South Floridians, I thought it would be courteous to start the program 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. Eastern time so that we can go and enjoy the Miami Heat beat the living crud out of Denver Nuggets in Game 3. So, what happened? I was resting my eyes for a little bit. I was like, you know what? I have a good half an hour to just relax and chill. And then all of a sudden I get bombarded at 7:03 with a bunch of messages because I'm a dummy. I'm a dummy. So anyways, I was scrambling to get ready, and here we are. Grateful to have you joining us for episode 23. We have an exciting show for you. Even though it started off a little bit of bumpy, I tell you, it's going to be a smooth flight for the rest of the evening. Actually, no, because the news is not as smooth as we would like, which is why very shortly we're going to be having the lovely Paris Mansouri joining us to give us the latest news and updates. It ain't looking good, which is why we need your attention, why we need to unify, why we need to amplify, and why we need to continue doing whatever we can to be the voice of the voiceless. So, let's just get straight to it. We're going to go ahead and bring lovely Paris. If I'm losing to get ready. So I need my savior to come on and allow me to get my mind back on straight, because it's definitely like this.
Hello.
Hi, Paris, and how are you? So, yeah, I swear to God, I was taking like my first nap in like 2 weeks, and I was like, Achesh, I have 30 minutes to take a nice little nap, and then I get bombarded with messages reminding me, Chachenga. So, good to see you.
For the record, he just said bombarded with messages. There was no such message.
No,
it was all of us being really concerned.
I wasn't actually implying. I mean, I can understand why you said that. I just meant I realized through those messages that I'm saying yes.
Okay. For me, it was more like, is everything okay? Because this doesn't usually happen.
I didn't change my calendar invite for the correct time today. So jokes aside, Paris, like I was taking a look at the notes earlier today, and I was boiling in so much anger and frustration. We're at day 264, and you got a ton of crappy news for us. So I'm going to buckle up, and I'm going to give you the car keys. So go ahead and tell us what's the newest and latest.
So first up, we've got the Biden administration, and it looks like they're gearing to restart nuclear talks. We've been hearing that for a long time, but it actually looks like it's actually happening right now behind the scenes. The Financial Times says that the envoy, his name's Robert Malley. He's the one who's been responsible for these conversations. Apparently, he's actually in formal talks with Amir Saeed Iravani, who's an official, his official counterpart as part of the Islamic regime. This is apparently their effort to re-engage the Islamic regime about concerns about expanding their nuclear capacities, and they're saying that this could trigger war. The U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has also been quoted as saying, quote, "As President Biden has repeatedly made clear, all options are on the table to ensure that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons." The Jerusalem Post is also adding in their 2 cents. They're saying that the Biden administration plan would put the nuclear regime, the Islamic regime's nuclear program on hold, but that it won't roll back the enriched uranium or the nuclear facilities in Iran. And basically, in exchange for all of that, they're going to get economic benefits, economic relief. They're going to get all their money to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. According to Israeli sources, the Biden administration wants to quiet the situation right now. So deal or no deal, they just want to have it paused until the 2024 US presidential election. So basically looks like that they're going to keep the chat going for another year and a half.
This is why everybody was asking for the past 7 months with the hashtag fire Robert O'Malley, and they were wondering, why do you still keep this person, in the office, and this is why. So the UN continues to act like the Islamic regime is not committing crimes against humanity and acts of terrorism. So you got something more to add about that?
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure you've been seeing it across social media as well. The Islamic Republic was just elected vice president of the UN General Assembly. So they're vice president of the UN General Assembly, the same General Assembly that's looking into it for crimes against humanity. I don't know, something doesn't make sense here. I don't know if I'm alone in not understanding. This is a 1-year term that's going to start on September 5th. If I'm looking to the side, that's where my notes are. And for those who aren't aware, the Islamic Republic was also appointed chair of the UN Human Rights Council Social Forum. And that's not all. I don't know if everyone is aware, but the Islamic regime's envoy was also appointed as the rapporteur of the Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Committee of the General Assembly and a member of the board of this committee. So like when it comes to nuclear talks at the UN, the Islamic regime was also a rapporteur, which kind of means like a go-between, like a representative, somebody who's overlooking it. It is absolutely incredible. And for anyone who's still petitioning the United Nations, still believes that the United Nations has the best interest of humans at heart and in mind, there's clearly something else going behind the scenes, and highly recommend you do a bit of research.
The UN has done nothing but piss me off for years. There's a new crackdown on university campuses across Iran. Who's being affected with those crackdowns?
Yeah, so according to the Center for Human Rights in Iran, university students and professors across the country are facing arrest, banishment, and expulsion. And those being targeted include everybody. So whether you're a tenured professor, whether you're a student starting, finishing, you're in your final semester, you're taking your final exams, it doesn't matter. There's at least 720 students that have been arrested officially since September 2022, but those are the numbers that are public. We actually don't know. I mean, we know that there were, Iran's version of MIT, Sharif University was attacked, individuals were taken. The numbers will never be fully known. But the numbers that are being made public right now are 720 have been officially arrested students. They also have counted 60 professors among those who are either expelled, suspended, or forced into retirement. Some have even had their salaries withheld, and all because they expressed their support for protests. That's the only reason. At least 11 professors from the University of Science and Technology in Tehran have been summoned for Islamic student poisonings as well. If you're not familiar with the story, the Islamic regime has been poisoning schoolgirls, but also other schools at other levels as well. And the executive director of the Center for Human Rights in Iran says, quote, university officials and committees are operating as extensions of the Islamic Republic's system of repression to crush the peaceful activism on campuses.
It's just the fact that there's a Center for Human Rights in Iran, it's based out of Iran, right?
It's not. It's the human rights in Iran, but they're based outside, so they're relying on official numbers that the state is giving, but they're not inside the country. They probably wouldn't be able to say things like this if they were.
What about recent updates on recent death sentences?
So there are several famous names that we've used hashtag for that have been made famous. Mohammad Ghobadu is one of them. He, since the beginning of the new year, he's been a name at the top of the list of those who are facing execution. He's been charged with corruption on earth, which is also in Persian called Moharebe. He was done so without his lawyer being present. His mother is, campaigning for him. We've used this hashtag. There's a Canadian member of parliament who's also advocated for him and has officially come forward as his representative. But there doesn't seem to be any news about him. I've been searching far and wide. So if anybody has an official update on Mohammad Ghobadu's case, please do DM me. But so far, the numbers out of Iran are terrifying. In the month of May alone, 142 people were killed by the Islamic regime under the guise of execution. I prefer not to use the word execution, mainly because It's not. It's state-sanctioned murder. These individuals were not actually committing crimes. They've just been arrested for protesting. And one of the numbers that was shared on social media is that in Iran, one person is executed every 6 hours.
A senior Islamic cleric says religion is weakening in Iran. What are his claims?
Yeah, so this is a report in Iran International. They're saying that Mohammad Abdul Qasim Dulabi is the person who's raising concerns. He serves as the liaison between Ibrahim Raisi's administration and the Islamic regime seminary. So he's high up there when it comes to like religious education and like knowledge of what's going on. And he said he's worried for the Islamic regime since it is a state built around the principles of Islam. He's referencing around 50,000 of Iran's 75,000 mosques. He says 50,000 mosques have closed down out of 75,000, which is very promising. And he's confirming that there's a declining number of individuals who are attending mosque services. And he said that Iranians of all ages, this is a quote, he says, Iranians of all ages are becoming wary of the regime's justification of Islam as the base of its brutal dictatorship. So it's really important to mention that when we are speaking about Islam in Iran and criticizing anything and saying that we're happy that mosques are closing, these mosques are being used as basically locations where terror is bred, where control is being, basically mass population control is being done through these mosques. They're not places of peace and reflection and prayer. They're places where individuals are radicalized under the Islamic regime because that's all they stand for. Now, hopefully in a free Iran, mosques and synagogues and churches will be allowed to operate freely and with correct guidance. Instead of breeding hate, they will breed what they are supposed to. But right now, we're very happy to hear that the seminaries are basically raising concern because hopefully the impact of the terror that's being disseminated is lessening. The
Islamic regime and Saudi Arabia are reestablishing diplomatic ties, and we've got China to thank for that one, right? So what is the immediate impact?
Yes. So the Islamic regime we've mentioned this, by the way, in Newscast before in our segments, that the Islamic regime and Saudi are basically shaking hands and making up, but it's official. It happened yesterday. The Islamic regime has opened its embassy in Saudi Arabia after 7 years. The embassy in Riyadh has reopened, and they're also reopening the consulate in Jeddah. Still no word on the Saudi embassy in Tehran or, you know, their consulate in Mashhad or who their ambassador is going to be. There are longer term agreements in terms of like technology and trade and all of that stuff. But right now, basically, this is going to facilitate pilgrimages to Saudi. So Iranians who want to get visas for pilgrimages in Saudi Arabia are going to have an easier time. And for anyone wondering why Iran and Saudi Arabia severed ties in 2016, it was because Saudi Arabia had a mass execution and a Shia cleric was among them. He was an important figure in Shia Islam. There were protests in Tehran, and basically the Saudi embassy in Tehran was ransacked, and basically they were like, we're done. So they closed their offices. And for the record, like anyone thinking everything is really great now between Saudi Arabia and Iran and Saudi has stopped mass executions, this past Sunday, Saudi executed 3 men from an eastern province in Saudi Arabia that are Shia as well. So in case Iran is like concerned about the fellow Shiites around the world, they're still being executed. So who knows why the embassy was really closed for all these years.
Before we get an update on detainees and protesters, we have a bit of good news by way of our women's hockey team.
Are you surprised at this? Because I'm so
pleasantly surprised, but nowadays Iranian women don't surprise me at all.
So they defied the odds at the Asian Pacific Ice Hockey Championship in Thailand. Like somebody who's in Canada, I'm like, to think about ice hockey in Thailand is very special, but it's great. It's an 8-nation event. The event was held in Thailand, and Iran killed it. The women were amazing. They beat India 17-1. They beat Kuwait 20-0. They beat Kyrgyzstan 26-0. They beat the United Arab Emirates. They shut them out as well, 14-0 in the quarterfinals. They beat Singapore 3-0 in the semis. So they were doing really well. And then they went to the gold medal game. They faced Thailand. They were 1-1 for most of the game, and then they lost 3-1. So they walked away with silver. But I mean, again, the contention of what they would face if they were facing a German team or a Danish or Canadian or American, obviously they're not at that level. But to think, like, for anyone watching, sports in Iran are not subsidized by the states at all. They have jobs. They are, you know, this is not their livelihood. They can't just like be athletes for their life. They're doing this on the side for the love of it, and probably at their own expense, and to do so well. Honestly, I was like prepping. I reread this report like twice before I practiced this. I was like bawling my eyes out, like just thinking of these incredible women, the hardships they face, the challenges they face even getting out of their country, because women don't have the right to leave the country unless they get approval from their husbands or for their fathers.
No disrespect
so
to the
good
women's
for them.
team, but I need to look at the video to see if the India, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, UAE, and Singapore teams had goalies. How is a hockey match 26-0? Wow.
Look, listen, without, because that's what the score would probably be for any of those teams facing an American team, a Canadian team, a Swedish team. So it's nothing against those teams. Like, once you have a really strong team on one side, that those can be the scores. But it's like, it's crazy that the Iranian national team is somehow so far ahead of the Indian national team, which I would think is probably on
now
par.
that you gave
so
good
good
news,
for them.
I want one more good news. What's another good news before we go back to the bad?
Usually the news of death or an anniversary of a death isn't good news, but this guy, it's fabulous news. Ayatollah Khamenei, it was the anniversary, the 34th year commemorating his death, and Iranians turned it into a national holiday, which is really wonderful. It was June 4th. So the Islamic regime tried to make it very somber, but you could see videos of Iranians around the country dancing, and hopefully we will do so on his grave very soon. I usually don't advocate for that sort of stuff, but for murderous maniac, I think that is
just
the kind
like
of thing we
Arash
could do.
OSO made in his video. I would be doing more than just dancing on his grave. So I don't know if you guys saw, if you guys follow OSO Arash, we had him on Countdown a couple months ago. He just recently made a very funny video, like 2-3 days ago. Just go to OSO Arash's video Instagram, guys, and you're gonna get a.
What was it? Because I would think I would take champagne, because he doesn't drink champagne.
No.
I would like spray champagne all over.
No, this one is
maybe that was
rated number 2, if you know what I mean. And so
okay.
and like
oh, okay.
Arash's video,
I just got it.
He always plays like multiple characters. So it's like a long line of people in line for
Oh, I understand. To use it, I get it. We should actually use the whole shrine for that reason, but that's another story for another day. Maybe we could turn into like a family center. Anyways, we could do something really great with it. I'm looking at Cafe Rahkar. They're so concerned they are religious at all. Oh yeah, I think they were talking. I'm looking at some of the notes here, the comments. I think she was talking about the seminaries closing down. Hallelujah, she says there's nothing Iranian women cannot do. She's completely agreed. Mariam Aronson, oh, you're welcome. I'm glad. I made it through this newscast without crying, you guys. I'm very excited.
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
maybe that'll change
we are
now.
transitioning back to some not so funny news. Updates about protesters and detainees, please.
Yes, so Nahid Taghavi, she's a 66-year-old German Iranian who's in jail. Apparently she's suffering and she's in danger with great pain. She was convicted of national security breaches that her family denies. There are also reports that Voria Ghafouri, I don't know if you remember, but that he'd been arrested previously. He's a very famous and celebrated football player in Iran. He's been arrested again and brought to Evin. A reminder that Puya Bakhtiari's mother has been in jail for the past 10 months. For those who don't know, Puya Bakhtiari was taking part in protests in 2019, and he was shot 16 times. His father has been jailed for denouncing his death. His mother has now been in jail for 10 months. Like, literally, your son was killed by the state, you protested, so they just put you in jail as well. There are 3 Baluch children who still face death sentences. We have Mohammad Darwish Naroui, he's Kuhkan, he's 17, and Yasin Kabdani, he's 19 years old. And Vahid Afkari's brother, Vahid Afkari, by the way, his crime is being the brother of Navid Afkari, who was murdered by the regime. He's been in jail for over 1,000 days.
Let's go to some action items. Hashtags we're following this week and should be using.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what's happening with Mohammad Ghabadou. He is awaiting, unfortunately, I mean, his death sentence has been confirmed by the state, so we're hopefully not awaiting his death. If you could use his name, say his name to save his life, so hashtag Mohammad Ghabadou, hashtag IRGC terrorist, hashtag save Sharmad, which is another unlawfully detained foreign national who's awaiting execution. His name is Jamshid Sharmad. Tumaj Salehi, Saman Yassin, of course, and the mainstays, Mahsa Amini and Iran Revolution.
And your final message for our listeners, although you're going to have a final message today on this special episode, but in ending the news segment, what's your final message?
Our language is called Persian, not Farsi. There are many reasons for that, but just like when we speak in Persian, we say Zabunima Farsi has. We never say Zabunima Persian has, because Persian is not a word that we say in Persian. Persian is an English word, so let's use the correct word for our language when we're speaking in English, which is Persian. And the other thing, I don't know how often I should say this, but I think at this point in the revolution, it's time to buckle down, do some proper research. There's enough information out there about individuals who are famous, who are so-called advocates and representatives for this revolution. If you're not into researching, there's enough information available right now and enough proof that you don't have to dig that far to get confirmation that these individuals are not good actors. So
Thank you so much. And you'll be joining us a little bit later. This special episode, we're going to be dedicating it to a culture segment. We're going to be talking about tear gun. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Tear gun and other holidays.
Yeah, and tear
that we're going to discover
this year
together
falls on July 4th. Azadi Festival falls on July 3rd. Azadi Festival starts at 1:11 p.m. and ends at 1:11 a.m., which means that at midnight at Azadi Festival, we get to also celebrate Tear God. Now, what exactly is Tear God? Come back later after we have Shiva, and then after we have Mona, we'll have Paris back for a cultural segment. So stay tuned, and Paris, see you later.
Thanks.
All right.